Hello my fellow mob slayers, my name is Void241 and this is my first official build guide / build documentation. This video is about the Rage Stormbrand Inquisitor, an amazing build designed for the endgame to finish off everything at a high speed. The initial build design was done by Shiaxu. I'll leave a link to his YouTube down in the description. Definitely check him out if you want to see other fun zoomy endgame builds and good Path of Exile content. This build in particular will focus on the Aegis Aurora version of the Stormbrand Inquisitor, a build designed to withstand hardened combat to allow you to triumph over the endgame, with little but a scratch on your shiny energy shield pool. I will leave some gameplay and show off some invitations, and there will be additional footage of an Uber Maven as well as a floor 4 of the Sanctum for those of you who wish to see some more gameplay. I will, however, leave those out of this video as the clips are a little too lengthy. After that, we can kick into the guide portion of the video and I will explain the build as well as my gear in its entirety. Remember to leave a like if you enjoy the video and subscribe for future juiced content. Enjoy. Now let's jump into the build guide portion of this video. So, first things first, what is the most important part of any build? It's probably the weapon. So let's look at the weapon first things first. So for a really long time this was the weapon I'm using. It's a really bad weapon for all purposes. This is effectively just 3 mods. The increased crit chance is a really bad mod, although it is D1. I had to settle here because I ran out of currency while crafting this. Ideally you probably want spell damage on the prefix and you probably want crit multi or cost speed on the suffix. I'll explain how to craft this in the PoB later. It is not as good as this wand. This wand I mirrored because I was enjoying the build a lot. However, mirroring a wand is not important for this build. You don't need a mirrored wand to play this build. I played it for a very long time without a mirrored wand, and this is just required if you want to do the absolute maximum end of min-maxing, and I will explain why this doesn't really matter once we get to the PoB later. Moving on, then we have the Heat Shiver. Now, why are we using Heat Shiver? Well, the benefit of Heat Shiver is that it's a really broken item right now, because if you freeze enemies, you will effectively be doing double damage against them if you deal cold damage, right? And you already get 30% more damage from the gain 1% of cold damage as extra fire damage per 1% chill effect on enemy, because in most cases you will be chilling enemies for 30%. In this build's case, you will always be chilling for 30%, and I will explain exactly why this happens once we get to the PoB later. What is important to know is that the +1 maximum power Judge's Corruption is a very, very powerful corruption. It gives you a lot of damage, and the regenerate life, while not necessary, is very, very helpful to this build. The reason is because it works in synergy with these gloves. Now, Calm Spirit is a very, very good pair of gloves on an Inquisitor, and the reason for this is because it converts life regeneration to rage regeneration. This allows us to have nearly permanent uptime on Berserk, and the main reason for this is because we can achieve nearly 15 or 16 rage regen while being an Inquisitor. And the main benefit of using Calm Spirit on an Inquisitor as opposed to any other class is that the Inquisitor still benefits from the upside of Pious Path. Pious Path causes your life regeneration to also recover your energy shield. Now, the thing is, Pious Path applies before Calm Spirit, so even though you're taking away your life regen and turning it into rage regen, you still regenerate energy shield, as you will see later on once I equip all the gear. So moving on from this is a pair of boots that is absolutely unnecessary for this build. I just decided to splurge a ton of currency crafting these. You definitely don't want to try and craft these. This was a very, very lucky craft. I spent around 100 divines. These boots on average would probably cost you upwards of what a mirror is worth right now, and I would not recommend crafting these. If you were to try and craft these, I would probably go for like a classic pair of elevated tailwind boots, and I would probably Awakener Orbit with non-damaging ailment effect, and then Reforge Crit for elusive. You probably look for a nice suffix, either chaos resistance or life regen or regeneration rate, and then you finally finish off with the prefixes with avoid being chilled, avoid being frozen. The most important mods here are the avoid being chilled and avoid being frozen, because that fixes our ailment immunity aside from Divergent Tempest Shield. We have ailment complete immunity to all the basic elemental ailments, because we have chill and freeze avoidance from here, we have shock avoidance from Tempest Shield, and then this gives us Aberrath gives us 60% less duration of ignite, and I had a jewel on my tree with less duration of ignite, but as you will see, we have so much regen that ignites really don't make a difference to this build, so I decided to drop that. Moving on, we have two Call of the Brotherhoods. Now over here, nothing really matters. You can go for a multitude of corruptions, you can go for lightning damage to spells, you can go for zealotry aura effect, or the best implicit is probably cost speed. I think cost speed is even better than this double corruption I have here. It's just that when I was buying them, there were none on the market. And yeah, the main thing that you need to note is that the ring needs to be catalyzed so that 48% of your damage is converted to cold damage instead of just 40% of your lightning damage. That is a very, very important mod. You need to make sure that's there, because this will convert 96% of your lightning to cold, which is then moved forward into fire from cold as extra thanks to your heat shiver. So if you don't catalyze these rings, it's a big loss on your damage. Now the next thing we're using is a Restless Ward. I managed to get a really, really nice double corruption. This is probably the best double corruption you can get, because you use an empower in your 6th link. And the purpose of this chest is really just to give you a bunch of regen for your rage, as well as a bunch of move speed so you can run around faster. You could probably inch out a little more damage and defense if you went for something like a Skin of the Loyal with a nice double corrupt, or perhaps if you got a Skin of the Lords with glancing blows, then you could drop this Thread of Hope and then maybe get a jewel socket back. You'd have a point back. You could maybe look at getting an impossible escape, or you could get like a quad crit multi-jewel. There's really a lot of places you can go with this build. I really haven't pushed into the min-maxing portion as far as damage is concerned. I've mostly been looking for utility and quality of life, as well as fixing my defense. Now the next thing that I would take a look at is probably the Call of the Brotherhood. This is an extremely powerful amulet, mostly because of two mods. It makes our maximum frenzy charges equal to our maximum power charges. We currently have 6 maximum power charges. We are gaining 1 maximum from our helmet, and we are gaining 2 from the tree, putting us at 6. This would give us +3 maximum frenzy charges, as well as gives us a ton of elusive effect. Elusive effect is extremely powerful because it gives us a lot of move speed, and that is not something I want to drop. In the end game, you would probably look into getting an Ashes of the Stars if you can somehow fix the 16 elemental resistance somewhere else. I was struggling to fix it on my gear, mostly because I got these boots. If you somehow can manage to get some resistance on your boots, my resistances get extremely tight, as you will see here. I'm only at 76% lightning res, so if you can somehow fix your elemental resistance on your boots, maybe get some cold and lightning res there, you could probably drop this and then get an Ashes, unless you're just an absolute god and you find a corrupted Ashes with elemental resistance. That's up to you. Next thing that I would like to put attention into is the Aegis Aurora. Now, I have a fairly budget Aegis. This is not really expensive, it's just really well rolled. Ideally you'd want a double corruption on this. Probably chance to block spell damage is ideal, because without this wheel then you would be at like 64 and 65 in terms of attack block and spell block, meaning dropping this wheel is completely fine, which would give you 4 more points to put on the tree elsewhere. And as you can see, this build is very, very point hungry. Every point makes a significant difference, so I would definitely look into that. Otherwise, you could probably go for Fizz taken as. Fizz taken as corruptions are always very, very strong. They will increase your phase max hit. I never had any problems dying to Fizz damage, since we do have 4 endurance charges that last 30 seconds that we gain on hit and on kill thanks to our Forbidden Flame and Flesh. However, of course, it would be really, really cozy if you just got some more Fizz taken as. Now, moving on to our flasks, we have 2 flasks here which we alternate, aside from of course the Mage Blood flasks. I'll get to that in a bit. So the first is Oriet's End and the second is a Bottle of Faith. Now, as is probably obvious, you use the Oriet's End for mapping and you use the Bottle of Faith. Now, the reason I'm using Oriet's End is because I have currently spec'd into 40% increased brand attachment range. This is just for extra coziness while mapping, but also for sanctums, because then you can pretty much off-screen any single guard in the entire sanctum without even looking at them, and you just freeze them and they die and they can't touch you. So that's the main reason that I'm using Oriet's End, is because without having the brands reattach, your clear is slightly gimped unless you have some sort of explode in the build, so hence the use of Oriet's End. Bottled Faith is a huge single target steroid. I always equip it for any sort of endgame boss. I don't need to use it for maps, of course, nor delirious content, but if you're facing up against like a pinnacle boss, or you're doing an uber boss, or if you're going into a Lycia fight, I mean, it's just more damage. Why wouldn't you equip this? Because, I mean, your Oriet's End isn't really going to be useful at all, so I usually keep it here in my inventory, and before the fight I just do a quick 2-second swap. Now, moving on to the gems. What are the important gems? So number 1 is we have our life aura setup. The main thing about this is you definitely want Anomalous Arrogance. Main reason is, as you can see, we're reserving a decent amount of life. Now I have to equip the rest of my auras to show you this. But yeah, just basic aura stuff. But as you can see, I have more life than I have reserved, and this is incredibly, incredibly, incredibly important, because the way Petrified Blood works is that if you have if you have more than 50% of your life reserved, then you're not using Petrified Blood to its fullest potential, and here's how. When you equip Petrified Blood, it stops you from gaining life above 50%. Now, this is normally completely fine, and except that because of the way that Life Leech works, Life Leech is removed when your unreserved life is filled, right? If your life if you have more than 50% life reserved, then you're going to fill up more life then you're going to fill up your entire life bar, and therefore your leech will be removed. However, Petrified Blood, because it stops your life gain at 50% of your life, regardless of your reservation, unless of course you reserve more. If you reserve less than 50% of your life will no longer regain past 50%. But because of the way leech works, your leech will also no longer stop because your unreserved life is not full. So it's important to only reserve around 49% of your life. As you can see, my reserved life is below my halfway threshold, so that you always have some form of overleech. Moving on, these are just alt qualities. I'm attaching enhance to all three of these because all of their alt qualities are extremely powerful. Assassin's Mark gives enemies take increased damage, Divergent Berserk gives us more spell damage, as well as Divergent Righteous Fire giving us spell damage. Now, as you can see, as I told you earlier, Calm's Spirit still allows us to regen energy shield based on our life regen, even though we're using it for rage regen. And one more thing I would like to note is I'm going to activate Berserk here. You can see how long it lasts, and just decide for yourselves. I mean, this uptime is pretty good in my opinion. Moving on, we have our basic Molten Shell cost 1 damage taken setup. I will keep this at a low level so that it procs really early. The main reason for this is while we are incredibly tanky, our actual hit pool is extremely small. We only have 1600 ES and 1500 life. And taking 500 life means we're already taking around 16% of our HP before Molten Shell activates, so you definitely don't want this to be at a higher level where it requires you to take like 2000 damage, because that would be most of your life, so then Molten Shell wouldn't be doing anything. We attach Divergent Arcane Surge to Flame Dash. The reason we go Divergent is just for more uptime. It's just more cozy. I don't care about getting more damage, I just want it to be cozier. Our main 6th link is a level 21 Stormbrand. There's no real good alt qualities there. We're using crit damage because we have a significant lack of crit multi, as I will show you in the PoB. We're using Conk Effect because AoE for some reason doesn't do much for Stormbrand, even though it has an AoE tag. We're using Divergent Swiftbrand because initially I didn't want to use Swiftbrand because, well, Swiftbrand reduces your brand duration, and I thought it would make it very uncomfortable to play. However, this is counteracted by the fact that we have cluster jewels that cause us to drop 2 brands at once. As you can see, we have Remarkable on our clusters, and we have 3 of them, which basically means that we have a 35% chance times 3 to drop an additional brand. So we always drop 2 brands. As you can see here, like every time I cast Stormbrand, I drop 2 brands. Alright. Now, moving on, then we use an Empower, which is juiced by our chest as well, since it has +1. Putting our Stormbrand at level 30, and then finally we use an Anomalous Inspiration to fix our mana costs. And then in our shield we just use a Divergent Inspiration and a Divergent Divine Blessing, both with reduced mana cost, to bring our Wrath cost down to 0 so that we can cast it without it having any mana cost, pretty much. Now, for our Mage Blood flasks, as you can see, my Mage Blood isn't particularly well rolled, so it's not really whatever, but as you can see, these are our flasks. We need reduced mana cost because this build is extremely mana hungry without this mod, and I'd be kind of trolling if I wasn't using this. We don't have any space for minus mana cost on any of our jewelry, and we can't fit in a Militant Faith into our tree, so this flask craft is kind of needed. Elemental Resistance fixes our Eliras. As you can see, this build is very slot hungry in terms of uniques. We only have 2 rare items in the build, and one of them is our weapons, so Elemental Res on a flask is extremely necessary. That's also why I'm going for an Amethyst flask, because it's very hard to fit Chaos Res into this build. If you can, you would probably get Chaos Res on your 2-tone boots. At the moment, I only have 23% Chaos Res. Now, I haven't died to Chaos damage as of yet, but having Chaos Res on my boots would definitely make me feel a lot more comfy if that amount was at 50%. Then we have a Silver Flask and a Quicksilver Flask. Silver and Quicksilver just make us move faster, that's important. And then of course we're using a Granite Flask because armor, Aegis, do I need to explain more? Okay, now let's hop into our skill tree here. So we're using a Thread of Hope to allocate glancing blows because, as well, we're using an Aegis Aurora. Having glancing blows makes a significant difference to our effective life pool. Our clusters are just basic clusters. We always chill, shock, and ignite thanks to our the fact that we're going lightning to cold and then getting extra as fire. So sadist is probably the best notable we can get here. Our mediums are mostly just remarkable grand design, and that's just so that we have more brand attachment range for more range, as well as just again so that we can drop 2 brands. Snowstorm just gives us lightning and it's extra cold. This brutal restraint here, you guys can probably find one with decent notables. I'll show you how to do that once we get into PoB, but I mean, I just have some basic like elemental damage in here. You could probably get like non-curse aura effect or something else. This cluster is extremely necessary. This will bring your freeze threshold up to par as well as give you a ton of damage. This also increases your shock effect, so that's why I deem this necessary. This is just a phasing jewel with some resistances that gives you CB. Not really a big deal there. You could probably find one of these for really cheap. This Megalomaniac is completely unnecessary. You just want a remarkable cluster here. I just wanted to do something fancy, so I got a Megalomaniac. You really don't want to do anything like this. For a Watcher's Eye, this is a very subpar Watcher's Eye. You will probably find a million other Watcher's Eye combinations that are better for this, especially with the fact that we're running 4 different auras. There is definitely a better Watcher's Eye combination. I have found other good ones. I just had a really good deal on this one, which is why I went ahead and picked it up. And then finally, moving on to our Forbidden Flame and Flesh, this allocates Harmony of Purpose, which basically gives us power, frenzy, and endurance charges. This is very important for the build as we require it to generate all 3 of our charges. We have no way of generating them otherwise. So if you can pick this up for cheap, please do. This should probably be one of the first things you get into the build after it gets functioning, because having access to all 3 charges is a very big deal. Now without further ado, let's move into the PoB portion of this video. Okay, now that we're in PoB, I'm gonna show you guys why. First off, why having a mirrored wand isn't the most important thing in the world. It is a big damage loss to not have this. This is a very good wand, but I'll show you guys why it isn't important. I will also explain how Heat Shiver works and how you guys can calculate this, as well as showing you guys how you know if you're getting your freeze or not. And yeah, so let's get into it. So first things first, why is the wand not important? Now, the wand not being important ties directly into Heat Shiver, and the main reason is this, right? I swap my wand, I lose a lot of damage. It's kind of painful. Now, one thing I would like to make you pay attention to is the ailment threshold. Now, ailment threshold, the way it works is you basically want this ailment threshold to be higher than the ailment threshold of the boss that you're trying to freeze. Most endgame bosses have an ailment threshold of under 7 million. The only one that has a higher ailment threshold than this is, I believe, certain bosses in 100% delirium. But for the purposes of actually clearing content, 7 million, 7.8 million or something is the highest ailment threshold that I have found for pinnacle bosses, and that is Cirrus. Now, please correct me if I'm wrong down in the comments below, but that's all I have found in terms of information for ailment threshold, and I found it on PoEDB. So I'm just going off of what I know as well as what I've tested in game, and generally speaking, if you're above this ailment threshold, you can freeze the boss. Now, if I was to switch this to Uber, to being an Uber boss, right? Wait, just a second. If I was to switch this to being like an Uber boss, right? As you can see, my ailment threshold goes down significantly. However, it's still above that 7.8 million threshold. But the thing is, this requires you to have Bottled Faith up. And without Bottled Faith up, as you can see, you're at 7.6, which means you're not quite there. So my solution to this, before I switched to before I switched to the mirrored wand was I just took out this, I took out this, and I took out this. Now we do take a significant hit to our EHP, but I was fine with this because again this is just for uber bossing, and voila, you take freeze duration and bam. Now you're at 11.6 million ailment threshold without Bottled Faith, and you really don't have any problems. Even freezing someone like Uber Cirrus, it's not an issue, right? So that is why having a mirrored wand isn't particularly important, because I don't think you're going to be randomly running Uber bosses in the middle of your maps. If you are, then I apologize for assuming that you're not, but in essence you can just do a 6-point respec and then you're good to go as far as freezing Uber bosses is concerned. Now, as far as damage output goes, you could probably get a better wand than this. How I would probably craft a better wand is as follows. You would look for Fractured +1 all lightning, and then you would fossil spam until you get all spell skill gems. And after this point, all you do is you ashling, and you go prefixes cannot be changed, and you ashling until you get spell damage with gain non-chaos, right? And then you go prefixes cannot be changed, reforge caster. You are either going to get crit chance for spells or you will get cost speed. You probably do this until you have like D3 cost speed, and then you go to your crafting bench and then you craft on crit multi, right? And this is ideally what your wand would look like, and you probably just enchant it with a nice harvest enchant, like increased elemental damage, and then have 30% quality on this thing. And this is most likely your weapon. It's quite a bit better than my current one, as you can see. That was my current one. This is a decent 5 to 6% DPS increase, and this was actually more expensive to craft because I did it incorrectly and I got really unlucky, so you probably craft this for around the same price. And of course, if you get the mirrored wand, that is insane. You will have really, really good damage and your ailment threshold will go through the roof. Other than this, there's not much to explain in the PoB. One thing I would like to show you is how to search for a good timeless jewel. So you probably click down here. For those of you who don't know, you scroll over to the socket you want. For me, it's the one at minion instability. You click filter nodes. That'll show you all the nodes that you have allocated. You go to fallback nodes. You click generate. When you sort by full DPS, it's going to generate everything that affects your DPS. Personally, I don't need ailment duration because my ailments are fine. I don't mind aura effect. I don't need flask effect necessarily, although that is of course something nice you can get. And now I'm going to search, and we can probably find something like this, right? And then scroll down, grab this, socket it in here. As you can see, DPS increase. Told you I don't have a very good brutal restraint, and yeah, that's pretty much it. So that's about it for the PoB. There's not much to show here. I have all the prices of the items listed here if you guys want to check that out. And other than that, yeah, that's pretty much it. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and definitely again leave a like if you enjoyed, and subscribe if you have not. Yeah, click that little notification icon, and the next time I upload, perhaps you'll see another really good build guide, assuming this one's up to your standards. Anyway, thanks for watching. I'll catch you guys next time. See ya.